What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. So we've come to the end of the year for the international rugby scene. We finished the autumn internationals. There's a bunch of videos on the channel for you guys to check out. Now, one of the big things we've been talking about across the last few months anyway is about the world rankings, about how the teams have been moving around depending on their wins, some losses. We've seen some big switch-ups. And one of the big talking points surrounding this is, of course, the actual World Cup. We're only about 9 months away now from that World Cup starting. Now, one of the big controversies that happened around the World Cup pick, there you can see here, it did actually get drawn on December 9th, 2020. Now, that feels like an incredibly long time ago. I don't even remember if I actually had my channel when this draw was done, but I do remember sitting there watching the live stream as it was all happening. And one of the things I remember a lot of people talking about was, why are we doing this draw so early? 3 years out from when the actual World Cup's going to be happening. Of course, there's going to be a lot of teams changing around. Now, obviously, there's a logistics side to it. There's a lot of things going on with terms of actually trying to organise the teams, where they're going to play, how they're going to sell tickets. They have to know in advance how they're going to sort of work themselves out. But now that we've officially got the full list of every team, who's going to be in what pool, because we were still waiting for a couple of the last columns to be filled in at the time of that World Cup draw, I thought it'd be fun to go and have a look now, 1 year out. Now we know exactly how the teams are, how the World Cup could actually look if it was done 1 year out rather than 3. And there's a lot of switch around. And like I said, the last two columns in this table over here are basically the same. Now, they all get in through their own little mini tournaments. They're not done off the world rankings. Realistically, we're looking at the first 3 columns for the big switches. So what I've done is I've gone through all the teams to work out where they were ranked at the time of the World Cup draws happening. And what we're going to do is just interchange these teams as we're sort of going through all the way down from 1 through to 12 based on who got in, based on those world rankings, and see how they switch up. Now we know what they look like a year out. So if we did this draw now, let's put those 2 columns in where they would probably have ended up anyway, and we got that top 12. Now, there is one exception to this, which is quite interesting. Had the World Cup draw been happening now, there is actually one swap. Let's assume that they actually won the tournaments that the other team won, but there is actually one swap happening here because Samoa are actually technically 11th now and would have got in. So we're going to exchange Samoa for Fiji in this. But in terms of the rest of the teams, looking at how this switches up now. So Samoa move into 11th. They're going to move into Pool C as opposed to Fiji. And let's assume Fiji won the same thing that Samoa won in order for them to get into Pool D. Wales go from 4th in the world when it first was drawn down to 9th. They'll move into Pool D. Italy are going to be in that Pool A where they remain already, and Japan remain in that Pool D already down in 10th. So already a couple of switches around. It's going to be interesting to see how this one pans out. When we move on to the next 4 rankings then, this is where the teams really begin to have a bit of a shift up here. So Scotland finishing in 7th move into Group A from Group B. England have come in at 5th, so they are going to be in Group B as opposed to Group D. Australia remain in Group C where they already are. Now, there was a big switch here because of that game against Wales. Had it gone the other way, they would have looked completely different again, and Argentina remain in Group D. But the top 4 is where this really makes a big difference. Now, looking at the top 4 coming in here, Ireland, of course, at that number 1 spot at the end of the 2022 year, sees them remain in Pool B. Obviously, South Africa were actually in first place when this draw was done originally. So Ireland are going to retain there, but going at number 1. So with France now ranked 2nd in the world, they remain in Pool A, but they actually go to the top of Pool A and join Scotland and Italy. The All Blacks go in alongside Argentina and Japan in Pool D. And finally, the Springboks go in alongside the Wallabies and Samoa. Now, this is quite interesting to see how this actually switches up. So what it actually sort of comes down to at the end of the year is you have A and B, an awful lot of basically just the 6 Nations teams, the Northern Hemisphere teams there, versus in C and D, the Rugby Championship teams, the Southern Hemisphere teams. Now, that's quite interesting. It's funny how that seems to have worked itself out by the end of the year. But one thing that I actually quite like about this is that we see the top 4 teams in the world currently spread out across the 4 different pools. Because one of the issues we have at the minute coming to this 2023 World Cup, as they stand at the minute, all 4 of those teams are in Pool A and B. Now, the way the groups actually work and how they play each other, the top of Group A plays the runner-up of Group B and vice versa, and then it happens with C and D. Now, what that means is the top 4 teams in the world currently, let's say they all finish in the top 2 of their pools, will go into the quarterfinals and all play each other. And then in the semi-finals, it will be the two teams that won those quarterfinals playing each other, which means in the top 4 teams in the entire world, only one of them can actually get into the finals, which is quite extraordinary seeing how far the teams have come in the last few years. Now, if it ended up being how it could look now, 1 year out, imagine the way this goes. You'd probably have, let's say, France and Scotland. I think Group B is probably one of the more competitive pools there for Ireland, England and Wales. Springboks and Wallabies most likely getting out of there. And let's say All Blacks versus Argentina. But what it does mean is that a lot of these teams would go outside of the pools. They might play each other in a mix-up in the quarterfinals. They have every chance to then progress from the quarterfinals into the semi-finals playing some of the others, and you might actually have a World Cup final based out of 2 of the top 4 teams in the world right now. Now, obviously, anything can happen in the world of rugby. Not all the time. We've seen over this autumn international, we've seen Georgia beat Wales, we've seen Italy beat the Wallabies. You know, things can happen in world rugby. It's not to say that is actually how it will end up, but I kind of like this table as it looks now more than how it actually looks in real life. Because when we look at how the actual draws are, Group C and D, basically those teams now, let's say Wales, Wallabies, England, Japan and Argentina, they're the teams that you'll be finding in the top 10. When you actually compare them to how that will look towards the end of the tournament, it's looking likely, given their new values, that you could see a 5th, 6th, 8th, 9th or 10th in the world potentially going up against number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 ranked in the world. And although it would probably be quite a competitive final given the teams that we've got, I feel like I personally would like to see the teams performing at the top of their game getting into that World Cup final. It just makes it a bit harder for other teams to progress. You've got to beat the best to be the best. And I feel like the way it looks a year out actually sort of amplifies that a bit more. I feel like the teams where they stand now, 5th, 6th, 8th, 10th, if they're all just sort of playing each other, they can get to a World Cup final, but there's every likelihood that a lower ranking team could actually get into the final against one of the top teams in the world as it stands, which might just mean a less competitive World Cup final. I'm sure whichever teams get into the final will absolutely play their socks off when you get to that final, but I just think it could have been more fun to have had some of those top ranked teams. Now obviously we've still got a year to go. These team rankings can also switch up over the next year, so obviously these teams can switch up a bit more, but obviously you have to sort of give a length of time where it's actually feasible logistically to work out tickets, stadiums, planning it all out. I'm not sure if they need to be done 3 years early. I think it might have been a little bit early. I look forward to see what you guys have to say down in the comment section. Do you guys prefer how it looked when the draws were done, or how they look now based on the world rankings? I'm really looking forward to hear what you guys have to say down in the comment section. If you've enjoyed this one today, make sure to leave this video a like. If you'd wish you'd seen this video sooner, well, you could have. It was out on the Patreon on the channel. You can head over there, get yourself a subscription, help support the channel a little bit, and you get to see videos like this a little bit sooner. Thank you to all the existing Patreons, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this one today, and I'll see you all next time, guys. Bye-bye.